So here's the problem you're having. You are parking your Jeep, leaving it alone, and then randomly your fog lights are coming on and staying on even though all the switches are turned off. It's sitting there in a parking lot somewhere draining your battery, and you've got no idea why your fog lights are randomly coming on. Well, you've come to the right place to solve this problem. Let's start by going to your steering column. This is what it looks like from underneath. You need to remove this bottom panel. It's 2 screws. Go ahead and get to that. This is the top of your steering console. This is just the panel. With those 2 screws taken out from underneath, this ought to pop off pretty easy. It's not terribly important, but this is what the underside of your steering console looks like with that cover removed. And this is what the top of the steering console looks like. Now, this one is important because you need to remove those 2 Torx or Starbit screws there. So go ahead and get those 2 screws removed. Hopefully you can see this. There's a little red tab on the top of that plug that locks that plug into place. You're going to need to just slide that out just slightly. And there's one on the top of this plug too. There's only 2 plugs in the back of this console that need to be taken out, but you got to slide those little red tabs out just slightly to disengage the lock on both of those plugs. So as soon as you get those disconnected, go ahead and unplug those 2 plugs. With those 2 plugs disconnected, you should be able to wiggle out the entire switch control module here, and this is what you should end up with. The entire thing should come out pretty easily. Again, there's just those 2 screws holding it in place at the top and those 2 plugs that were in the back. This is what we're going to take inside and be working on. And just as an FYI, this is what the top of the steering column will look like with that control module removed. Okay, we're looking at the back of that control module, and we've got 2 Torx screws that need to be removed. One right here, where my finger is, and another one right there. So you need to go ahead and get those 2 screws removed. You'll also see this tiny plug up here in the back. You're going to want to unplug that and kind of unwrap the wire, kind of get it out of the way for right now. Very carefully go around the edge of the control module with a tiny screwdriver and start prying the back plate off there. Just depress all the tabs you need to depress. Be careful not to break any plastic. Just take your time and go slow. This is what the back plate should look like when it's removed. And this is what the back of the console is going to look like. Now, I would advise to take a picture of this so that you know where everything is. Now, I told you to take a picture so that you know where all these little white pieces go back. These are all little switch control pieces that are going to have to go back in later, so you're going to want to know where they came from. But at this point, we're going to remove this tiny Torx screw right here. And that's going to allow us to access this switch. This is our final destination, but we got to remove this little screw first. With that screw removed, this plate should pop right out. Might have to wiggle it around a little bit, but it'll come out. And this is what you'll be looking at. And we're finally going to be able to access the little white switch here that we're going to be working on. To remove this switch, all you got to do is roll it towards you, jiggle it around a little bit, and it'll pop right out. Now, this side here is the side that we're interested in. So go ahead and clean off any goop or anything like that that's on there. What has happened is that it's worn down. Here, let me show you here. The pin inside the housing, which is located right here, presses onto the back of that switch. And odds are it's worn down over time, especially if you've got 170,000 miles on your Jeep like mine does. So that's worn down. And instead of trying to build that up, what we're going to do is try to build up that part of the switch and allow it to make better contact. So coming back to our switch here, this spot that's got this goop on it, we're going to go ahead and get that all cleaned up, and then I'm going to show you about the easiest way known to man to build this switch up and make this work properly. Now our switch is all cleaned up, as you can see here, and it's this little indent that causes the switch not to allow your lights to shut off. It's kind of complicated. I'm not going to go into it, but that's what it does. There's a lot of ways out there to fill this in. You could use epoxy or something like that if you feel like messing with that kind of thing. Any other type of fill to build that up. But I'm going to show you the absolute cheapest way in the world. So here we have our switch right here. This is what we're going to be fixing. I've got a very high-tech piece of plastic right here that I've cut to size. It's actually the piece of a butter lid, and it fits in there just perfectly. That's right, I said a piece of a butter lid. I didn't stutter. That fits in there just right, like so. And I've got a piece of heat shrink that I've cut to size. That's going to slip right over the switch, right over to that point there. Going to heat it up, shrink it on there, and that is going to solve our problem. There you go. As you can see, everything was in place. Heat shrink that perfectly. I'm not dealing with any glue. I'm not dealing with any epoxy. I'm not waiting for anything to dry. I've built that up exactly the way that I need to, created the exact correct spacing to make this switch function properly again. If you don't believe me, give it a try. I've got my switch back in place there. As you can see, everything will be making proper connection. Again, I'm not dealing with any glue that's going to get on any other parts. I'm not dealing with any built-up epoxy that's going to fail or fall off. Just a simple piece of plastic and a little piece of heat shrink. So I went ahead and put that entire console piece back together. We're good to go. I'll go out and put it back on the Jeep here and make sure everything works properly. I already know that it does, so I'm not too concerned about that. If you want to know how to put this back on the Jeep, go back and watch the beginning of this video in reverse and you'll figure out how to put this back in place. And I can assure you that this process will work and your fog lights won't randomly come on when you're parked. Thanks for joining me on this little car repair project today. I really appreciate you stopping by. Maybe you learned something, maybe you didn't. Either way, you know I'd appreciate that thumbs up like. Feel free to leave a comment below. We're on Instagram now. Check us out there, see what we're up to throughout the week. If you enjoy videos about the randomness of our amazing world, consider clicking on the globe to subscribe, or maybe checking out one of the other videos right here.